the late President Moi used to say, that siasa mbaya ni maisha mbaya. And when you reflect upon those wise words, it is indeed true that we are responsible for whatever we find in our society. We deserve the leaders that we have, because we are the ones who elect those leaders. I know that as a judiciary, many a time we are accused of many things. And one of the ills that we are accused of is the fact that there is a lot of backlog in courts. And occasionally you find an advocate coming before you and complaining that his case or his client's case has been pending for as long as 10, sometimes 15 years, and is representing somebody who's been in custody for all that period of time. And because at such a time, really, as judges, we are not allowed to engage because we only speak through our judgments, and I always feel the urge to want to answer back and say, do you know that we are in this thing together? Because we elected the leaders that we elected. And we elected thieves to be our leaders. And those thieves stole money. And because the money was stolen from the public coffers, we are not in a position to hire more judges to be able to come and clear things up. So are we not joined together? In short, what I'm trying to say is that we owe it to ourselves to see that we better our society. Whether it is in terms of governance, in having political leaders being answerable to the Kenyan citizenry, the responsibility squarely falls on us. And I would like you to take this as a challenge that we actually require to be represented in the August House by persons of integrity, by leaders that we can be able to count on. And unless and until we do that, we will always be complaining that we are shortchanged by our leaders. So siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to commemorate and celebrate an enduring ideal that forms the very bedrock of our nation, the idea of democracy. Indeed, Article 4.2 of our Constitution expresses a foundational idea that the Republic of Kenya shall be a multi-party democracy state. This shows that democratic governance is a core aspiration of the people of Kenya. The theme for this year's International Day of Democracy, Empowerment for All, is not just a slogan, but a profound truth about the nexus of democracy and well-being. And this is manifested best in how our Constitution strives for these two goals. The Kenyan citizenry, after many years of struggle and sacrifices, gave themselves a new charter of governance in the year 2010. This constitution embodies a promise, the promise of a social transformation that will not only redefine governance, but also the essence of life itself for every Kenyan. At the heart of the social transformation promise is the aspiration for a state and society that is not only democratically governed, but also a promise to prosperity by enabling everyone to realize their potential. By our Constitution enshrining all categories of rights, that is civil rights, political rights, social, economic, and cultural rights, the Constitution doesn't just empower, it also uplifts. It means that all the rights are mutually reinforcing and interrelated in working together to enable the well-being of every citizen and the democratic governance of our country. When democracy works well, it does not just create policies. It creates environments where happiness thrives, where individuals, including the youth, feel valued and are heard, and where dreams are not just dreamt, but are actually realized. Yet a true and rich democracy, the kind our Constitution envisions, requires nurturing. It means our democracy is not limited to just going to voting booths on the day of elections or attending campaign rallies during the campaign season. It is about every voice that speaks up in town hall meetings and barazas and mobilizing our communities to participate in causes that have a bearing on the well-being of all of us. It means that we must practice democracy each and every day of the 5-year cycle, not just waiting for the day of elections or the campaign season. The point being that our Constitution, in its wisdom, does not only outline the duties of the government, but calls upon its citizens to be active citizens by making public participation in all governance processes a mandatory constitutional requirement. It encourages a symphony of voices in governance, harmonizing in the pursuit of happiness for all. I therefore urge you to take advantage of this constitutional imperative and actively participate and get involved in the governance of our country. Let us also not forget that every major leap in our country's governance, be it attaining independence in the 1960s, reclaiming multi-party democracy in the early 1990s, and getting our transformative constitution in the year 2010, involved sacrifices and active involvement by Kenyans in deciding our destiny as a nation and a people. All these transformative initiatives in our national history are momentous expression of our commitment to democratic ideals. Therefore, the voices of the patriots who are involved in the past struggles should resonate in our hearts and minds, reminding us of the value of democratic governance. As the custodians of this legacy, I challenge each one of us to ask ourselves today, are we doing enough to nurture this rich democracy? Are we living the transformative promise of our Constitution? Ladies and gentlemen, at the heart of democratic governance is the conduct of free and fair elections. The point is that we can only talk of having in place a democratic system of government when there is a possibility of changing the government of the day through elections. This means that electoral processes are the lifeblood through which elections run. In Kenya, we've embraced a culture of democratic elections as the basis for our government. Every 5 years, without fail, we troop to polling stations to cast ballots and decide who our elected leaders will be. Even more important and worth celebrating is that Kenyans are slowly but surely embracing a culture of peaceful elections, with any contestations being referred to the courts for resolution in accordance with the dictates of the law. Indeed, one has to look no further for evidence that we are consolidating our democratic ideals than the just concluded 2022 general elections. Kenyans went to the elections with trepidation and fear that we could see electoral-related violence. The international media, as usual, true to Kenya, as has been the ritual every 5 years, waiting to report to the world of outbreak of election-related violence. But Kenyans proved the naysayers wrong and affirmed that our democracy and peace-building efforts that we embarked on after the year 2007 are bearing fruit. As we congratulate ourselves for the peaceful manner in which we conducted ourselves during the 2022 elections, we must focus ahead and embrace peaceful resolution of electoral disputes as the only means of entrenching the gains that we have seen over the years. This is the only way through which we can ensure that peace endures in our communities and in our nation. As we celebrate the consolidation of democracy in Kenya, we must also appreciate that we live at a time that has been described by democratic theory scholars as a time of democratic regression in Africa and across the world. Democratic regression has manifested itself in our continent through the rise in incidents of coup d'etats, the weakening of independence of institutions that are to serve as horizontal checks and balance of the exercise of public power, and increased incidents of abuse of human rights. All these are manifestations that the institutional and normative protections of democratic governance are being weakened across the continent. To paint in broad strokes the emerging state of democracy on our continent, following a period of autocratic rule across almost all countries in the continent in the immediate post-independence periods, the early 1990s saw emergence of democratic reform movements across the sub-Saharan Africa. The democracy wave swept across the continent, starting from Benin and Zambia in the year 1991, and then spreading to other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, including Kenya in the year 1992. Subsequently, it came to be largely accepted across most of the continent that multi-party elections was the only legitimate basis for formation of government. In addition, most countries across the continent progressively expanded the scope of human rights and fundamental freedoms enjoyed by their citizens, and entrenched the separation of powers and independence of various institutions geared towards supporting democracy. However, it is now clear that most of the countries that transited from either single-party rule or military rule to multi-party democracy have been unable to sustain the demands of democratic governance. In recent times, we witnessed the comeback of coup d'etats in a number of countries in the continent. From 2021, we have seen such reversals in Burkina Faso, Chad, Guinea, Mali, Sudan, and most recently in Niger and Gabon. It is important to point out that in line with the theme of this year's democracy, which is empowerment for all, proponents of some of the coup d'etats have attempted to justify their actions on the failures by democratic governments to respond to their people's material living conditions and plight. Given this emerging view, I believe it is timely that we are appreciating that democratic governance should have material dividends to the people. This is the only way through which we will be able to convince our people across the continent that democracy is the best form of governance. Therefore, even as we discuss democracy, we must always link the same with social justice. We must continue advocating that our government should implement and comply with constitutional guarantees to socio-economic entitlements like access to housing, water, sanitation, health care, education, and social security. Additionally, we must continue advocating for our governments to tackle concerns around socio-economic inequality and protection of the vulnerable in the society. In my view, it is the enforcement of these social justice provisions of our Constitution that will go a long way in increasing the attractiveness of the idea of democratic constitutionalism. Ladies and gentlemen, whilst the emergence of coup d'etats is often the explicit manifestation of democratic regression, there are other more insidious and more prevalent forms of democratic regression that can easily be missed by an discerning observer. A more widespread and prevalent form of democratic regression in the continent involves the undermining and attempts to erode the functioning and efficacy of democratic institutions. This expresses itself through attacks on the functioning of the separation of powers. It often involves attempts to control the legislature, the judiciary, independent constitutional commission, and sub-national or federal units of government. This is intended to erode the independence of this institution. I therefore urge activists, and particularly the youth and those in the democracy movement, to work towards protecting the independence of institutions, including the judiciary, the legislature, and the independent constitutional commission. In conclusion, I wish to say that Kenya has a rich history for agitation for and the practice of democratic governance. Let us be inspired by that history and the possibilities that that history brings to the fore, and particularly as we leave the mantle to the generation of today. We used to talk about the youth being the leaders of tomorrow, but that tomorrow came a bit too fast, and you are the leaders of today. Let us all be guided by the very same Constitution and its dream for a socially transformed Kenya, where we as citizens participate actively and vibrantly in the governance of our country, and where the well-being of citizens is secured. And we shall then be able to flourish and realize our lives in their full potential. Thank you, and God bless you all. Honorable Justice Mother Koome, Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court of Kenya. Thank you.